Hey everyone, Ron Newcomb here with the Indie Coach podcast. I am here with a special guest that I'll be introducing momentarily. But before we do, I just wanted to mention that any content that Eddie and I might share is strictly just for entertainment purposes only and to hopefully inspire you to get out there and do some things. This is certainly not legal or professional advice. We encourage you to seek out your own guidance for anything that we might cover today. So the Indie Coach podcast is really where creatives meets entrepreneurship, and it is trying to empower indie artists to thrive in their passion and their business. So my guest today is Dr. Eddie Gamarra with Gamarra Media. And so we can just dive right into it. Eddie, if you wouldn't mind just maybe giving a little background and context of your filmmaking journey, I think that'd be helpful to kind of start us off.
Sure. I mean, my filmmaking journey began as a young child when I was absolutely traumatized by the remake of King Kong, 1977, I believe it was. I was 5 years old, was at the theater with my uncle, who was a film lover. And, Jessica Lange is tied up to the poles with the vines, and the natives are beating their drums, and the thunder's crashing, the lightning striking, and the beast roars. And I just lost it. I lost it. And I literally was like screaming and crying and had to be dragged out of the theater by my uncle. Um, I've always been writing little stories ever since I was a little kid, putting on plays in my backyard with my He-Man figures based on the comic books that they used to come with.
Oh, yeah.
Um, you know, my film background was very skewed in certain ways because I was not allowed to see R-rated movies as a kid, and my family didn't have cable. Staten Island was like the last borough in New York to get cable. So my mind was blown in high school. I went to an all-boys Jesuit high school in Manhattan called Regis High School, and sophomore year we had a film class, and the film professor showed us Hitchcock's Rear Window, but used that movie to also teach us about Freud and concepts like fetishism and castration anxiety. And my super repressed little Catholic boy brain just exploded. Um, and I was a psych major at Vassar and a film minor, went to NYU's Tisch School of the Arts and got a master's in cinema studies because they had not one but two faculty who taught the very esoteric subfield of psychoanalytic film
Wow.
theory. And I was doing that by night, but by day, I was lucky enough to be working at Nickelodeon at the corporate headquarters in Manhattan during the day, doing in the home video department back when they were making orange VHS cassettes for the Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy. I then moved to Viacom, the parent company back then, and was a legal assistant. And so it was a really fascinating real world education to be sort of at the corporate headquarters of a major multinational media company by day, and then in the ivory tower of academia by night. And those two worlds are so far afield from one another. I was like, how can I be a bridge? So I thought about becoming an entertainment lawyer, but my desire back then was really to become a psychoanalyst. So I went to Emory University and was in their Graduate Institute of the Liberal Arts, which was an interdisciplinary program. And I started a psychoanalytic studies program with my advisor, but also maintained my film studies. I had made some short films in college. I made some short films in graduate school. Um, and at that young age, I realized like I'm a terrible director. I'm a decent actor. I want to be a good writer, and I aspire to be a great producer. So when I was done with academia, I wrapped up being a visiting assistant professor at Emory back in like 2002 or 2003. And I came to LA with no job. Took a couple months of pounding the pavement networking, and I landed at a company called Alloy, which is a book packaging company that's responsible for Gossip Girl and Pretty Little Liars and Vampire Diaries, Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. It was a great kind of model because the company would come up with the book ideas, they would own the copyright, whereas usually the author retains the copyright. And then they would sell these book proposals to publishers and then sell them as film and television. So, like my academic background, my job at Alloy was kind of interdisciplinary in that I was doing film and TV and publishing. So, did that for a year as they were launching their LA office. Was a literary manager at a company called the Gotham Group. I represented screenwriters and directors working in live action film and television. I had a larger list of clients working in the animation sector, animation, film, and TV, and there were writers and directors and artists and animators and animation studios. And I was also the co-head of the book department. And so I represented companies like Simon and Schuster Children's Books, HarperCollins Children's Books, Scholastic, little boutique publishers. I worked with many book agencies and authors and illustrators, all with the goal of selling books into Hollywood. Of the five movies that I was an executive producer on, the Maze Runner trilogy, and then Stargirl, which is was on Disney Plus, were YA book adaptations, young adult book adaptations. So again, my entire career has sort of been living at the intersections of film and TV and publishing. My journey took me to Paramount, where I returned to Nickelodeon, and I worked across Nick Jr., the preschool brand, the 6 to 11 group for Nickelodeon, both in animation and live action, a YA brand called Awesomeness, which is the company behind the studio behind To All the Boys I Loved Before and Pen 15, and a recent show that's done quite well called School Spirits. And as you know, anyone listening to the podcast, if you paid attention to the media, you've seen Paramount go through, like many companies, a ton of layoffs. And so I was let go in February and started my own company in July and officially announced the company in November. That's
Wow,
really a long answer.
no, that's great. Well, you've done a lot. Yeah, you and I are about the same age, so that's an awesome. That's the way I've always found it, particularly in LA. It's or Hollywood, I should say. People always traverse a little differently. It's never a linear line. But I also know that by just saying that, you do leave breadcrumbs along the way, and it does help. I think some people, um, just try to navigate that. What do you see yourself more of now? You've been like a writer, producer, worked in a lot of different areas. What do you see yourself as now?
So I've been a student for my entire life, from basically preschool to PhD. I'm always trying to learn new things, learn about different industries. I think part of the reason I was somewhat successful as a film and TV co-agent for publishers and book agents was because I tried to teach myself about the publishing industry, and really become fluent in that industry's vernacular. And so I was able to explain to book agents and authors and illustrators and editors how the entertainment business worked, and being that ambassador, being that translator, I think really paid dividends in the short and long term, in my careers back then, but also in my entrepreneurial endeavors now. People trust that I can explain like difficult stuff easily for them. Um, Yeah, I mean, I describe myself in my consulting business as one part development executive, one part literary agent, one part life coach, um, one part therapist. I want to work with my clients on a very human level, because I feel like politicians, professors, and people in Hollywood, these are sort of lifestyle careers. Like, you live and breathe what you do. And we very much blend the personal and the professional. And I want to spend time with my clients always, helping them sort of pick apart what are their human life goals, separate from their career goals, and how do they relate or not relate to their career goals. And then once we establish kind of what the goals are, be it personally or professionally, then we begin to build strategies, bespoke strategies, to help them succeed in accomplishing those goals.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's, one of the reasons why I call this podcast. It's not a mentorship, it's more of like a coaching program where you're kind of in and out of somebody's life for a moment,
Mhm.
but you can be really impactful if you can equip somebody with the right information. And so it's supposed to be these snippets of intel that we can give people with an insight into their creative vision and execution, and hopefully not just creative, but entrepreneurial as well. Is
Love
there
that.
anything that you would do differently along the way? Hindsight, of course, is 2020, and we have the advantage of that being a little more seasoned now. Is there anything that you would look back and do differently?
There's one thing I would have done differently as a young person, which is as an avid reader of not just novels and nonfiction. I also read a lot of comics and graphic novels and magazines. Very, very much an avid reader. I would have paid attention to the mastheads, like who are the people who are actually making these comics and magazines, and I would have paid more attention to bylines and author, bylines. Like I didn't ever really traffic in the information of who was actually creating this stuff. I had a classmate in college whose dad was a Hollywood actor in a show called Hill Street Blues. And in our film classes, my classmate, the daughter of this actor, she would always sit through the end credits. Every other student would get up as soon as the movie was over and kind of start heading out of the classroom. And she would stay and sit through the entire end credits. And I said, what are you doing? Let's go. And she's like, no, no, no. My dad always taught me, always pay attention to the end credits because these are your neighbors. These are your coworkers. These are your family and friends. Like this is how the community works. And you have to support your community by staying for the end credits. And so even though when I was little, I didn't pay attention to credits in books or comics, I began paying attention to credits in movies. I just wish I had been a little bit more attentive and more strategic in how I then researched, these creators and the companies behind these movies and TV shows. That's one thing I definitely would have done differently. The second thing I would have done differently, I had a good background in sort of entertainment law because I've done hundreds of deals. Even though I'm not a lawyer, I've done hundreds of deals when I was a lit manager, book to film deals, animation deals, book to publishing deals. And so I was very lucky to have a very good mentor who had been like a copyright attorney, but who had turned into a literary manager. And she was one of my bosses. She was a great mentor on the legal side. I wish I'd paid more attention to the financial side, especially indie financing. Um, the world, not just entertainment, but the world is run by law and by money. And I'm savvier in the law, and I really wish I was savvier about money.
Yeah, no, I can certainly relate and appreciate that, even though I was a police officer for a little time, so I kind of navigate towards the legal side myself. But the
Hmm.
financial, even putting together like a term sheet, I feel
Hmm.
okay about it, but I don't feel great about it. It's
Yeah,
one of those things, am I leaving something on the table? And yeah, just want to make sure that I'm also not coming off foolish. And
yeah.
so, no, I can totally relate to that. Because you've lived in kind of both camps, any advice, thoughts, recommendations on how someone would find an agent or maybe even on the flip side, a producer?
So in the film and TV community, finding a literary agent or literary manager is extraordinarily difficult. The amount of cutback that the industry has endured between COVID and then the two strikes, and then Wall Street just hammering media companies. I mean, it's been devastating. I know hundreds of people in the executive ranks, hundreds of people who were full-time, agents and managers who don't have jobs anymore. There's just been that much contraction in the business. So I can give practical advice on how to find a rep, be it an agent or a manager. But I wouldn't advocate it, and I can get to that later. I'm very much a proponent of the make it yourself model right now. If you are trying to find an agent or a manager as a screenwriter or a director or an actor, you want to make literally a list, an Excel spreadsheet, and think about um, every movie and every TV show that you've loved that's come out in the last 3 years, and it has to be recent, it has to be in the last 3 years, and think about who's making the stuff that you love, and you figure out who the directors and writers were in those projects that you've loved, and then start filling out your Excel spreadsheet to figure out who repped those people, what agents, what managers, and what lawyers, and what publicists might have repped those people making the stuff that you love and who have careers that you wish you had. Um, and then you just start going through LinkedIn and all your socials and your college alumni groups if you went to college. Um, you know, you have to figure out some way where you can get to 1 degree or 2 degrees of separation from these people. Be very surgical, ask for a 15-minute informational, research the person a ton before that informational. Never ask a question where the answer could be easily found online. That's an insult to the person. Um, and ask two or three really smart questions. And then stay in touch with people. If the person you've done an informational with has um, had a new deal announcement, some agent just sold a big project in a bidding war, email them and say congratulations. Stay in their inbox in a very positive way.
Yeah.
Don't keep going to people and say, read my stuff, watch my reel. Celebrate your peers in the community and be very well informed and be courageous to ask for 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's great advice. I definitely like that. And it seems doable. It's actionable and achievable.
I
Um,
mean, Ron, I used to say to like every intern and every assistant that I've ever worked with, be it when I was a literary manager or as a studio executive, um, we're all human beings. So don't be afraid to reach out and say, hey, would love to chat with you. We're all human. B, do the deep research, like be learned before you sit down with the person. Um, but like you can't get caught in this. I'm putting people on a pedestal and I'm afraid to talk to them.
yeah,
The entertainment industry does not reward shyness. It
yeah,
rewards being bold
yeah. Great point. Yep.
and be a citizen of the business. Read the trades, read Deadline, read the Hollywood Reporter, read Variety, know who's who, create flashcards. I had an assistant who once used the old Variety magazine and he would cut out people's headshots and their credits and he would make flashcards so he would learn. I always loved that about him. Um, know who's buying and who's selling what, know who's hiring whom. Go to every possible screening, book reading, signing, award screening that you can go to. Go to every conference you can go to. Um, be a citizen of the business.
Man, I like that. That's a great quote. How do you see the industry evolving at this moment? You alluded to some things that are certainly so pervasive that it is obviously not to talk about it because it's impacted so many people. And like you said, a lot of coworkers, peers, and friends. I too I can go on LinkedIn and I just see the green circle, man, and it
Mhm,
just seems to be everywhere in the industry. So it's
mhm.
hard not to talk about that. It's
Yeah,
also hard not to talk about AI. People are very opinionated about AI, and I approach that cautiously.
yeah,
I don't want to I don't want to I certainly understand what people are saying and the fear of that. Any of
mhm,
those topics can be on the table or not,
yeah.
but anything that you would like to maybe throw up, you can see like a caution flag, like this is coming or it's here.
Mhm,
It's something that
yeah.
the industry has evolved.
Let's circle back to AI because I would love to talk about it, but let me answer the question in a slightly different way, right? So back in early 2024, people were saying, "Oh, we got to survive until 25," and I would say to people like, "No, no, the industry is not going to be back in 2025." And people are like, "What are you talking about? That's like a whole year from now." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. You're missing is a couple of key things from a very macro perspective. One, America needed to have an election. Two, we had to see what the Fed did with the interest rates because both the election results and the Fed's policy about rate cuts were going to impact mergers and acquisitions and affordable money access, right? The free flow of loans. And those two things impact every industry, but have a direct impact on Hollywood. Very specifically, when you think about two of the five major studios, Warner Discovery and Paramount Global, both of these companies, and this is all public information, look at their stock prices from 3 years ago
Yeah.
to what it is today. These companies have lost what, 30, 40, 50, 60% of their value per share. And that means there's hundreds of millions of dollars of value of these companies that have been lost, which means in order to show profitability to Wall Street, which hates media companies after the streaming wars, I mean, some companies, um, there's no free flow of cash. There's going to be a move towards foreign co-financing and foreign co-productions. which means more work outside of LA and outside of the United States. The number of TV shows and films being ordered is reduced. The budgets for these movies and TV shows, for the most part, are being reduced. The staffs at these media companies are being reduced. So there's no survive till 25. Like we are going to have to wait until Warner Discovery figures out Zaslav's sales strategy, which we're getting some more insights into now. We need Skydance and Paramount to be resolved. And what people don't understand is when you have massive level executive changes at these kinds of media companies, the trickle down effect is those new leaders want to employ their own staff, the staff that they want to hire, who have their own tastes, which impact the slate choices, both economically and creatively.
Yeah.
So, like the Paramount slate, the Warner Brothers slate, you're going to see some major shifts as these, M&A uh, situations get resolved. Um, the destabilizing economically of the industry has a very granular effect on things like Apple lets go of half of their kids and family team. HBO Max closes down their entire kids and family team. They take Looney Tunes off of their streaming platform. Like, there's always an economic reason behind these changes, but the ripple effect is no resolution, no meaningful resolution in the near future. And I mean that the full calendar year of 2025. Um, so yeah, that pivots me then to the make it yourself, right? So after I was laid off in February, I spent March, April, and May doing hundreds of meetings with people, not just in film and television and not just in book publishing, but people in finance, people in technology, people in the education sector, people in the world of therapy, and just sort of seeing where's the world going. And one of the simple truths was we are very much in an entrepreneurial moment. We're in a DIY moment. And while all these big companies are figuring out, their strategies and how to make themselves show Wall Street that they're profitable again, within all that chaos is opportunity. The thing is, the individual creator has to be super savvy about money and content creation. I used to say to my clients when I was a lit manager, the two most important words in Hollywood are own and control. The studios always want to own and control the IP. Walt Disney founded a 100-year company based on owning public domain fairy tales by putting his signature and his imprimatur on those tales. Um, so whenever someone does a deal in Hollywood, the buyer always wants to own and control all the rights. And that's going to change because as studios don't have cash and have to rely on foreign money and foreign partners, they're going to have to co-own and have to cut different kinds of deals.
Right.
Um, Individual creators could be taking advantage of all of this maelstrom, and if they can create, as Mark Duplass says, a $500 an episode indie TV show, shoot it, go make it. You can kind of figure out distribution later, and or take advantage of platforms like Vimeo, platforms like YouTube, and the average screenwriter has to think producerially now. The average producer has to think like an SEO, search engine optimization engineer. We all have to teach ourselves marketing to promote ourselves. And the same thing is true in book publishing. Book publishers, for the most part, even the big five book publishers, their marketing budget goes to a small fraction of the total number of books that they promote. Authors have to spend all of their time, all of their own free cash, paying to go to conferences, paying to market their books, paying to build their own websites, paying to travel to book signings. Like being a book author isn't about writing books. It's about being a marketing expert and being a CEO of your own company. So it doesn't matter what creative commerce you work in, fine art, music and Spotify, digital, podcasting, film, TV, animation, or books, or comics and graphic novels. Any creative commerce that you're involved in, the creator now has to wear every hat. And those who are willing to learn how to wear those hats and what those hats need to be will rise. And those that don't are just going to sort of get stuck, unfortunately.
No, I think you said it eloquently. I 100% agree with it. So let me ask you a follow-up question for for that task ahead of us and opportunity. Um, where does star power align? And I know you've done a lot of animation too, so I almost look at it from that lens too. Where does star power align within animation? But I'll ask it more generally, more macro. Does star power still matter in today's economy?
The two-word answer is Nicole Kidman. Look at how many projects Nicole Kidman's involved in right now,
Yeah,
right? She's been a movie star who's now in what, three TV shows, four TV shows? Um, Star power equals marketing might on a global level. Launching a new franchise like Lioness on Paramount Plus, right? Uh, Taylor Sheridan is no dummy. Of course, she's going to populate his show with Zoe Saldana, Nicole Kidman, like Morgan Freeman, like major recognizable names because those faces are recognized globally. So star power is absolutely essential. And when you go to and you've been to, I've not been to AFM, you've been to AFM. When you talk to film sales agents and now TV sales agents, they're going to tell you the value of an actor in a
yeah,
different territory. Like, what is it? Pierce Brosnan equals a lot of money in Ireland, for example, but may not have the same value in Germany or South Korea. So star power is 100% essential. It's always been, in order to get a green light on a feature film, it's almost always been you need a director or a star to get the green light. TV now is that as well, I
yeah,
believe. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think within that structure, I agree.
And Ron, you're seeing also a lot of stars, a lot of really great actors with really incredible skills, great talent, a great list of credits. They have no work, so now they're pivoting to podcasts or to starting their own book imprints or other industries, other creative industries where they can leverage their star power to great effect. I mean, look at the three guys behind that one podcast. It's what is it? Will Arnett and Sean and Jason Bateman, right? Those three guys. They have done extraordinarily well in the podcast space. Dak Shepard, he's not a major celebrity, but Kristen Bell is his wife, and they leverage their knownness into podcast power.
Yep, yep. No, it's amazing. I just saw Tarantino and one of his partners are doing kind of a little, freebie, but then there's kind of more behind the scenes and you can pay kind of an upsell kind of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
who wouldn't want to sit down and, talk to Tarantino a little bit from the film lens? I mean, it's a
yeah.
ton of fun. Um, if nobody knows anything, that old Hollywood moniker, what does a project have to do to get you excited? Or how do you gauge if a project is going to be good, successful, worth your effort, time? How does a project get you excited?
So I think about it in terms of a visual, right? It's a Venn diagram um, of sort of three circles. The first circle is me, my own personal taste, my own personal predilections, my own, um, yeah, my own taste, right? What gets me excited as a reader and as a viewer. The second circle is the entertainment industry, right? The actual business of show business. What's going to get buyers excited? What's going to get actors and directors excited? What's going to get producing partners excited? What's going to get the money people excited, right? And you have to think about that very strategically, right? My taste is absolutely subjective. The market is also subjective, but as we often talked about with like AFM and foreign pre-sales, like people are ranked. People have preferences, in terms of what their value is in town. Um, it's always still subjective, but there's some objective measures. For example, brand identity. Brand identity is an objective measure, and I'll use the kids business as a very clear example of that. Disney, as a family brand, traffics in fantasy fairy tale escapism. Their whole aesthetic is wish fulfillment and pixie dust, right? Whereas Nickelodeon is a bright orange logo with green slime. That bright orange is warm, it's happy, it's a high energy kind of orange, it's vibrant, it pops. The green slime, it's messy, it's gross, it's a little toxic, it's a little weird. It might be a little creepy, but it's also fun. When someone's trying to pitch a movie or a TV show, be it animated or live action, but if it's for a family audience, what Disney does and what Nickelodeon does are completely different. The same thing is true of Apple. What Apple TV does in the kids and family space is completely different than what Nickelodeon, what Disney does. And so, in a sense, you can't pitch the same project to those three buyers because they have completely different brand identities. And that's an objective factor. A good agent or a good manager is going to guide a creative through customizing a pitch to each of those brands because you're going to have to need three different pitches. The last circle is the giant question mark, which is the audience. You
Yeah.
never know, and you cannot predict what the audience is going to rally around.
Yeah.
And to this day, it doesn't matter if you're in a book club, if you are shopping on Amazon, word of mouth recommendations matter just as much now as they did since the advent of the Gutenberg press. Word of mouth matters a ton. So look at Book Talk, peer-to-peer, teen-to-teen recommendations. Certain titles skyrocket to the New York Times bestseller list. Recommendations matter a ton. If you buy this, you may like these five other things at the bottom of your Amazon shopping window. All of that matters so much, but you never know. You cannot predict that. You can attend to trends. It is very difficult to predict trends. Future performance cannot be based on past results, right? You see this in any investor portfolio, right? So if I can find something that fits nice between the circle of my taste, the circle of the entertainment industry's wants and needs, and what I think the audience is going to respond to, if I can find that little bit of overlap between those three circles, that's what I'm going to go for.
I like it. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely agree with you. I think you're spot on with the assessment. You sounds like you've been doing this a few years now.
Yeah,
Uh,
couple decades.
um, so when I was a police officer, we used to watch in the line of death shootings and it to learn. It was a hard
Mhm.
thing to watch, but the intent was not to Monday morning quarterback them. Someone had given their life, but to learn from them. And with
Mhm.
the same spirit in mind, this is where I ask this next question. It's not a sense of, hey, let's identify these people and mock them. It is from a
Mhm.
sense of, hey, let's try to learn. Do you see any place where creatives, and I mean that in the sense of like the indie creative mostly,
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
certainly could be just the creative at large, or Hollywood, either one of them, or maybe both, where do you see them blowing it?
That is a fascinating question. Um, so when I was living in Koreatown in the middle of Los Angeles, I was an elected city official through the neighborhood council system. And as a neighborhood council person, I worked closely with the Los Angeles Police Department. And I then ended up doing a 10-week citizens
Hmm.
police academy,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, and I wanted to learn what cops are dealing with because I think, the average person quite doesn't really quite understand both the bureaucracy and the day-to-day risks and life or death decisions that happen in a split second. And so I wanted to be more empathetic and better understanding. Especially this is all happening when the defund the police kind of movement was trying to take off, and I understood the logic behind defund the police, but I didn't love the vernacular. I didn't love the wording of that.
Yeah.
But we can save that for a separate podcast. But one of the things that I learned was that cops who are trained shooters have to go and get recertified and do their tests every year and have to stay on top of their weapon training. Um, when they fire their weapon, which is very, very rare, It's very rare for a cop to unholster their weapon. In the even rarer case that a police officer actually fires their weapon, they hit the target on average something like 18 to 22%. So 1 in 5 bullets actually hit the target.
Yeah.
That is a trained professional only hitting 1 out of 5.
Yeah.
That is a terrible ratio.
Yeah.
So one of the things that sort of I took with me from that is, hey, I'm never going to own a gun. In part because I could never stay on top of my training to even think that I'm going to be successful 1/5 of the time. And the thought of a bullet carrying, forward for hundreds of feet, or passing through plaster and lath walls, and I mean, bullets do travel.
Yeah.
That statistic changed how I thought about not only policing as a business and as a profession and as a calling. It changed my understanding of self-defense. It changed my understanding of the community around me, and how I want to live safely in this world. When I look at statistics in Hollywood, there are a couple of statistics that really have blown my mind. And film schools don't teach these things. Film schools don't actually prepare anyone for the business of show business, for the most part. I mean, some try to in some specific programs, or maybe they'll do like a workshop once in senior year, but it's not baked into the curriculum across the top 25 film schools, which really upsets me. But certain statistics, and I think it was maybe 5, 10 years ago, I read this one statistic. What was the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America, now just the MPA, um, released a report that said something to the effect of like, of the movies that made it to screen, it took on average 8 years for that movie to make it on screen.
Wow.
That's a statistic that completely transforms how I source my energy and how I dedicate my energy, how I work my way through the Hollywood system. It also manages my expectations, so that I really understand I'm in this for the long haul, right? And statistics like that can be radically transformative if they're taught to the average layperson. What I have found, which really breaks my heart, is that people forget that building a library of film and television content is akin to growing a vineyard at a winery.
Hmm.
We have been injected with a lot of tech money and private equity, and the economic thinking from the tech community and from venture capital and private equity sources is fast returns. And in the startup world, the tech startup world, you're looking at, when you listen to any of these presentations, we're looking at an 8x, 10x hockey stick return in 2 years. That's not how creative commerce works. It's
Yeah.
never been the way creative commerce has worked.
Hmm.
And trying to force that economic model
Hmm. Hmm.
statistically into film and TV production doesn't yield the right results.
Hmm.
People have to remember, you have to buy land, grow vines, hope those vines blossom. You have to have your grapes survive season after season. You got to pluck the grapes, not destroy them, bottle them, ferment them, barrel them, and then you got to market them. And a $2 Chuck bottle from Trader Joe's, those fresh grapes, they serve their purpose. And to me, that's kind of the indie world. Like those indie horror movies are like $2 Chuck. They serve a purpose. They're delicious in their own way. They're great for a picnic with your friends. But if you want to have something like Lincoln, Spielberg's Lincoln, it has to age. It has to go through an iterative process. Spielberg's the king of Hollywood, and it took him 12 years to get
Yeah.
Lincoln done, if
Right.
I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, I think you're right.
People have to understand the math, the statistical probability of projects moving forward,
Hmm.
and they don't.
Mm-mm.
So from cop statistics to Hollywood statistics, if you educate yourself about the actual numbers, you will be able to more confidently navigate the system. You will be more empowered to do it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's where data can serve us well and
Hmm.
could lead us, in a path of, because like you said, also, nobody knows anything about the audience, and the elusive audience is a finicky
Hmm.
mistress. You're trying to nail them down, but you just can't do it. And so there's always kind of an X factor with the audience. You had kind of mentioned this before, and you said that you're an avid reader, which I totally appreciate. I try to read as much as I can too. Um, do you have any books, even life-changing books, be it in film or entrepreneurship or just creativity, that you would recommend? And then also, not really a follow-up question, but just while you're thinking of that one, I'd love to get your sense also on film school. I have
Hmm.
five younglings. They're eventually going to decide college, yay or nay. And
Hmm.
if they do follow on my path, I'm trying to discern even now of where I kind of feel with it. And admittedly, it has changed over the years. So I'd
Hmm.
love to get your thoughts on any books you might recommend within the industry or without, and then your thoughts on film school.
So I could cite all the normal books, Writer's Journey, Save the Cat, Ed Catmull's book, Creativity Inc., the new one, new bestseller, from what is it, Rick Rubin. I could cite all those books. Those books should be on everyone's shelves, of course. Believe it or not, one of the most influential books that I've read in the last few years is about the concept of wabi sabi, which is like a Zen
Hmm.
Buddhist kind of concept, where in what the 14th century, 15th century, the Japanese Zen Buddhist monks were reacting to Japanese aesthetics and culture and sort of pivoting from celebrating a certain kind of beauty and celebrating a certain kind of symmetry in art and architecture and actually flipping it to find beauty in the uniqueness of an imperfectly like molded bowl, right? Um, and this wabi sabi concept kind of took the West by storm in
Hmm.
certain artistic communities.
Hmm.
But what it teaches you is to celebrate beauty within incompleteness. So, for example, this thing that I have on my wall here is an Enzo circle, and I got it at a Kyoto temple in a Buddhist temple in Kyoto. And basically, what it is in the West you have a symbol of a closed circle, the snake eating its own tail. It's called an Ouroboros, right?
Hmm.
In Japanese culture, it's an incomplete circle,
Hmm.
and and that is how life works, and you have to accept that. And when you accept the incompleteness and imperfection of life, and if you can find beauty in these imperfect moments,
Hmm.
um, you are free.
Hmm.
And I wish everyone in Hollywood would stop stressing out quite so much about getting signed at CAA and selling my pitch in an auction, and now I'm in development. It's just like draw your circle of peers. You could walk into any coffee shop in LA and casting for a movie right now. And if you're smart about your money and if you're clever about your resource management, you can shoot a feature film for not that much money this week.
Hmm.
And it won't be great. It won't be perfect, but there's no such thing as perfect. So go read this Wabi Sabi book. I can try and grab the title from my bookshelf.
Yeah.
That book really changed my mind about how much pressure I put on myself, and it changed how much expectation I put on the industry to meet my goals.
Hmm.
And I really am now much more self empowered to just pursue my own goals on my own terms.
Man, that's fantastic. Yeah, I have to tell you, I kind of wrestled a little bit with that kind of very line of thinking. I lost my brother, a little brother, unexpectedly a couple years ago at the
Oh,
age of 40. He had a
sorry.
heart attack. Yeah, thanks. But I only bring that up because for like 6 months after, I wrestled with, did he complete what he was intended to complete? One of those
Mhm.
things. And
Mhm.
certainly his life was snuffed out earlier than I would have liked. But I came to the conclusion just that is very, his birth was enough.
Yeah.
We put way too much pressure on us because we all have that hero's journey within us, right? You
Yeah.
want to be the chosen one, and yet
Right.
just him being and present and was
Yeah.
enough. And then everything else was like beautiful and gravy. It was like
Yeah.
him, my father and my brother, and all that was almost like bonus. And once I
Yeah.
kind of, at least personally, came to that, it opened up a lot for me to see his completeness. And I love
Yeah.
that idea of that incomplete circle. Like, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to be like, 120, lay down one night and go, okay, I finished everything. I'll
Right.
see y'all
Right.
later.
Right.
That's not going to happen. One of my favorite authors, a guy named David Gemmell, literally, they kind of asked him, how would you like to go out? And he was like, oh, in the middle of writing, right, one of
Hmm.
his books. And sure enough, that's exactly the way he went out. And although he went out sooner than I would have liked to, he was only like 56, I think.
Hmm.
But still, that almost poeticness of, I want to have a stack of empty stuff on my desk, of to-dos.
Hmm.
Just don't get to, because that's what life is. It is that. I love that imagery.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's funny, Ron. I mean, I literally just this past week finished my certificate program at University of Vermont at the end of life doula or death doula training.
hmm,
And I've grown up with death since a small child. One of the blessings and curses of a large Irish Catholic family. And just this week, I had a cousin die of a cardiac arrest who is my age, and um, having grown up with death sort of in your like not a specter haunting you, but just sort of in the corner of your house at all times, um, allowed me to do this program and learn how to help others. And I'm no expert, by the way. I mean, I just did this, first level class, but um, the certification process trains you to kind of begin to think differently about how to live well by preparing for the inevitable. The
hmm,
only known thing in any human
yeah,
being's life is that
right.
we are going to die.
That's right.
Now, some cultures believe in reincarnation and rebirth, and that's great. Support that and celebrate that. But the human body does die. And so if we know that and we aren't afraid of talking about our death, we can begin to plan for our death, and we can begin to plan for the potentialities of long drawn out dying versus sudden death. Every single parent should have a will. And if there's one thing that you take away from this podcast, it's that. Like,
Yeah,
literally, screw Hollywood and all that bullshit. Like, go write a will right now. Don't have your stuff in probate. Make your dying easier for your family to be
yeah,
able to handle. Get your paperwork in order now. Share password files where everyone can access, your accounts, set up your um, paperwork with your banks and credit card companies and all of that. Like, just it's an administrative pain in the ass. But if you do it all now, it saves so much grief and heartache down the road.
yeah,
Because I try now to live post the death of my mother, the death of my grandmother, who was like my second mother, the death of my father, post divorce. I'm trying to lead a life that is happy and healthy. And I feel like if I die in my sleep or if I get run over by a bus, everyone who I'm in touch with knows Eddie was Eddie was living to his fullest.
yeah, yeah. Amen to that. No, that's great. That's great. And important, like you said, probably the most important thing. My brother at 40, thought he had more time, and so that paperwork
Yeah,
was not done. And I can testify to the importance of getting that done.
yeah.
Um, what is the thing that made it possible for you to succeed?
Um, Eternal curiosity, the desire and the will to learn, the courage to ask questions and not be afraid of looking stupid. I firmly believe we are all living a constant stream of learning and teaching moments. I know what I know. I also know what I don't know. But now I also have the courage to advocate for myself and ask people who do know what I don't know to teach me. Um, and I say that with absolute humility and gratitude to all the mentors and all the coaches and all the trainers and all the educators who ever impacted my life. People who don't know how to ask for help will never succeed. People who don't know what they don't know will never succeed. They may get lucky once in a while. A broken clock is right twice a day. But like to truly succeed, you have to be constantly curious and um, and courageous enough to ask the question for clarification, for education. Um, One thing in Hollywood that happens all the time, you'll see this in meetings all the time. Like, oh, did you see that movie? And everyone's like, oh, yeah, 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 I saw that. 99% of the people haven't seen that movie, but they don't want to see, they don't want to, they're not comfortable admitting that they haven't seen it,
Yeah.
let alone, oh, I don't know who that actor is. Oh, I haven't heard of that director. Oh, tell me about them. Um, I had a friend in grad school who said to me, when you move to Hollywood, be sure to not include your PhD on your business card because Hollywood is filled with people who will think that you think you're smarter than they are.
Hmm.
And I went to Hollywood with that in my head. And when I was applying for entry level jobs at the age of 30, after having been a professor at a major university, I told the potential employers with whom I was interviewing, dude, I have no ego. I'll get you your latte. I'll pick up your dry cleaning. Like, I need to learn how this business works. And I'm a fast learner. So know that I'm going to be like asking questions. But that was 30 years old. I didn't learn how to say that out loud to other grown-ups um, for a really long time. Self-advocacy is extremely difficult, especially if you're like me, in that you come from a working class background, a
Hmm.
civil servant background, an immigrant background, and dare I say, a Catholic background. When you have a Catholic Latino immigrant father who tells you, don't ever ask your boss for a raise, just be glad that you're getting a biweekly paycheck and can put food on the table for your family, that's the worst advice.
Yeah.
I think Malcolm Gladwell has a chapter in one of his books about rich kids and poor kids learning how to negotiate for their allowance. Rich kids are encouraged to negotiate and self-advocate, and poor kids are not. Poor kids are just told to do it, and they do it. And I didn't learn self-advocacy until very late in life, and I hope to God it helps make me successful in
Yeah,
the future.
that's great. That's great. I'm definitely taking that one for my kids' sake for sure. Uh,
Teach them
I
how to
will.
negotiate.
I
Yeah,
like that. Yeah, and actually, funny enough, one of them tried to do it last night with staying up, and I need to um, reward her because her younger sister, I kind of went around the room. What time are you going to go to bed? And the older two were first, so they gave a time that they thought was great. Well, the younger ones, they gave an even later time, so I let them stay up. And the two that were, they were like, "What?"
that's hilarious.
Yeah, it was actually pretty comical. But
Yeah.
we didn't come back around to film school, so I'd love to just kind
Yeah,
of.
film school, super easy. So look, I studied film in high school, in college, at NYU at Tisch School of the Arts. I had a master's in cinema studies, and then in my academic work at Emory, I got a second master's and a PhD. And as a professor, I also taught film. So I've been within the academic world and how it treats film for a really long period of time. I haven't been in academia in 20 years as a professional full time, but I have done dozens of workshops, panels, presentations at universities all over the country. And I love being back in the classroom. And the thing that drives me absolutely crazy about modern academia is this push pull between trade school mentality and academic safe space. You absolutely need safe space to make mistakes, to throw out controversial ideas, to learn how to talk to other people, how to argue persuasively, how to write persuasively. You need a safe space to do that. But any academic program that doesn't contemplate the real world aspects of whatever discipline they're in is committing a criminal act against their students. They're committing a kind of fraud. And that's true of medical school, that's true of law school, nursing school, business school, as much as it is in the arts and sciences. If these disciplines are not beginning to prepare their students, their future alumni, with the fundamentals of how to navigate these industries, um, they should lose all of their grant money. They should never get students again. Those programs should be shut down.
Yeah, yeah. I frankly, I think we'll see some shut down. Um,
Mhm.
so I actually have a master's in counseling myself, so we share a little bit about that background as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I asked this question as we start to wind down. You've already kind of alluded to this actually quite a bit, which was helpful. How does one find longevity, or dare I say contentment, in the industry? How does one find longevity and contentment?
By understanding deeply how rare it is for the planets to align to
Hmm.
get a green light from a major company, by understanding the economic flow and how creators get screwed constantly, by having the courage to be entrepreneurial and circle the wagons and bring their friends together and just go and make something. Um, everyone comes to Los Angeles for the most part to be in the entertainment business to make something. They
Hmm.
want to make. They've relied on gatekeepers and um, systematically oppressive institutions to gatekeep access to finance, to gatekeep access to distribution, to gatekeep access to marketing. With user-generated platforms like YouTube and Vimeo, we now have access to distribution. With social media, we now have access to marketing in a very profound way. The last bastion is always about money. And here's the funny thing, Ron. I was in England in July and then up in Sheffield for the Children's Media Conference. But when I was in London, I was walking down this sort of shopping district called Mayfair. It's like the equivalent of Rodeo Drive in Los Angeles. It's like all the high-end stores. And with all the Bugattis and the Maseratis and the Lamborghinis and the Bentleys rolling up and down this neighborhood, the amount of wealth in these storefronts, the amount of wealth of jewels and watches being worn by the people on these streets was a really great reminder that there are literally billions of dollars floating around us at any given moment. You have to have the courage to ask for it. You have to have the smarts to research how to get it. And you have to understand writing your script or directing your short or acting in that one person show is essential, but equally essential is learning how to get money
Hmm.
because everyone does have to pay for food and rent or mortgage or gas. We all have fixed costs. And if you know your budget for your life, then you figure out your budget for your project, be it a book, a comic, a graphic novel. You can now access crowdfunding. Is it a pain in the ass? Of course. But guess what? You can do it. I was at an
Hmm.
indie comic book festival,
Hmm.
and one of my one of these people who I've always been tracking her company, she raised $2 million to do an animated show based off of one of her self-published books
Gosh, that's amazing.
because she has learned the system.
Oof.
$2 million is
Wow.
game changing,
Yeah.
but you can do it. You have to start teaching yourself about money.
Yeah. I have a saying, um, money's not a problem, it's the problem. And but
100%.
it's solvable though. And people sometimes
100%.
they throw their hands up and it's like, well, you can't do it.
No, you would be surprised what you get when you ask. And you have to know who to ask for what.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
did a political training program up in Minnesota from what was called the Wellstone Organization. And I was doing a how to run for political office training program for a long weekend. And one of the exercises was they give you a sheet, $1, $5, $10, $20, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $25,000, $100,000. And the exercise was write down the names of everyone you think who could give at each of those levels.
Hmm.
And I'm like, half of my friends are unemployed. I don't know anybody who has money. And then the more I sat there and thought about it for that hour, on paper, I raised a $500,000 between my $1 contributors and my $100,000 contributors, theoretically. But I had to ask myself, who would I be comfortable going to and
Yeah.
saying, hey, I'm running for office. Can you support my campaign by donating X or Y or Z? Same thing with a movie or a TV show or a book,
Yeah.
especially if you're doing crowdfunding. I have to have the boldness to ask, give what you can give. Here's what you're going to get in return. And you can free yourself as an entrepreneurial creative.
I love it, man. Nope, we're not bound. There's a lot of hurdles in 2024 and soon to be 2025, but they can be overcome.
Perfect.
Where can people find you? How can we support you? I loved our conversation. How can people get a
You
hold of you,
know,
Steve, and hire you out?
no, Ron, I mean, these are great questions, and I've done a bunch of podcasts, and I love your Q&A here. So thank you for that, and I appreciate your authenticity and your honesty about your own journey. I love the candor there. As for me, people can find me on LinkedIn, Eddie Gamarra, PhD. I did include the PhD, despite what my friend told me not to, but I wanted to, look, I worked hard and I got the degree, and it should be there. Um, so Eddie Gamarra, PhD on LinkedIn, and then GamarraMedia.com, GAMARRA Media, MEDIA, all one word.com. They can find me through my website. Um, yeah, would love to meet more folks and meet some of your listeners.
I love it, man. Yeah, I hope many take advantage and shoot you an email, give you a call, or give you a like on LinkedIn. Well, I appreciate time with you, Eddie, as well as all of you watching and listening. And don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment to let us know anyone's out there and actually listening. It does help the channel, as you can imagine. But I do believe we're good to conclude our discussion with Dr. Eddie Gamarra. And just remember, nothing is wasted.